It's Tuesday, June the 8th, 2010. This is the final hour of the Alex Jones Show. My name is Paul Joseph Watson. I'm the editor and writer at prisonplanet.com, and I'll be sitting in for the last 60 minutes on today's broadcast, as I did yesterday. Of course, we have Kurt Nimmo over at Infowars.com and Steve Watson, who is the writer and editor at Infowars.net, as well as prisonplanet.com. Now, Alex has been discussing the BP oil spill throughout the length of the broadcast, and within the last hour we've just published a report on this at prisonplanet.com, and there are a number of disturbing, suspicious and revealing pieces of evidence that, as Alex talked about in the past 3 hours, strongly indicate that not only was there foreknowledge of the explosion, but the so-called accident may indeed have been deliberate. Now, what we've seen over the past several days is, and especially today, this fake grandstanding by Obama. He's going to, quote, kick ass and deal with the culprits of whoever was behind and whoever was responsible for the oil spill. And basically, I'm just not buying it. I mean, Obama was anointed at the 2008 Bilderberg meeting in Chantilly, Virginia, where he met there with Hillary Clinton in this big secret meeting that was built up by the media but never actually reported on the fact that it was at Bilderberg. Now, BP basically is Bilderberg. Every single person of influence within British Petroleum is a key Bilderberg member and regular attendee. People like John Brown, the former CEO, people like the chairman, Henrik Svanberg, and of course the current chief executive of BP, Tony Hayward, who was recently pretty active in getting rid of his shares in BP right before the oil spill. That's one of the pieces of evidence we cover in the article. And of course, former BP chairman Peter Sutherland, who is now the chairman of Goldman Sachs, who also attended the Bilderberg meeting in Spain over this past weekend. So this sideshow, this Punch and Judy show that Obama is now going after BP and after the culprits of the oil spill, I'm just not buying it, because, I mean, the first thing that Obama did after this happened, and after it became pretty apparent that it was a big disaster and that it was ruining businesses and livelihoods all around the Gulf Coast, the first thing he did was go on holiday. In fact, he's been on 2 vacations since it happened. 2 weeks ago, he was playing basketball. I mean, come on. There's no way Obama's going after BP. They're both Bilderberg minions. They're on the same team. And indeed, it seems like Obama's taking one for the team with his political career, because there's certainly no way he's going to go after BP, because they're both together with the Bilderberg group in on this New World Order. And ultimately, the bigger this crisis gets and the more the media hypes it up, the bigger the opportunity to exploit it, which is, you know, exactly what people like Rahm Emanuel, Obama's top advisor, and Hillary Clinton both routinely call for, is for crises to be exploited to pursue the agenda of world government, which is exactly what's happening with this BP disaster. And it's not just the fact that Halliburton, as Alex mentioned in the last segment, purchased this company to deal with, specifically this company deals with oil spill cleanups, and Halliburton purchased it right before the explosion happened. It's not just the fact that Goldman Sachs, which of course is headed up now by Peter Sutherland, Bilderberger and former BP CEO, Goldman Sachs dumped 44% of its shares in BP, British Petroleum, during the first quarter of this year. And it's not just the fact that Tony Hayward, the current BP CEO, sold £1.4 million of his shares in BP in the weeks before the disaster. I mean, all that suggests that there was foreknowledge, indeed. But the most alarming smoking gun is the fact that BP's own investigative report into the oil spill on page 37, and we've got this linked up in the article on prisonplanet.com, quite clearly states that, quote, undocumented modifications were made to the hydraulic system that is used to seal the well in the event of an emergency before the explosion took place. So BP is now claiming that they don't know who did this, when it happened, it's completely undocumented, but that modifications were made to the very piece of equipment that is supposed to stop this kind of disaster from taking place. Now, why that's not all over the news, I have no idea, because it's right there in page 37 of BP's own investigative report into the disaster. So not only do we have the suspicious stock and share sales right before the event, Halliburton purchasing this oil spill cleanup company right before the event, but we have the fact that BP's own report says that unknown modifications occurred with the very equipment that's supposed to prevent this kind of disaster before the explosion took place. Now, obviously the question to ask is if this was deliberate or if anybody had foreknowledge of it and knew that it was about to take place in order to benefit. Cui bono, who benefits? I mean, experts are now saying that this could drag on for years and years and years. Well, we know that Obama and the globalists who control him, who pull his strings, who anointed him at the 2008 Bilderberg meeting, which was also attended by members of British Petroleum, they want a carbon tax. They want a gas tax. They want a consumption tax. It all basically means the same thing. But they're not going to get it with the situation that we've got in place at the moment. Certainly what would help them to get it rammed through is if the government, the federal government of the United States, nationalizes the oil companies, which we know is a stated goal of the Democrats. And so we've got, with the failure of Copenhagen and with the exposure of the phony global warming movement after ClimateGate, the carbon tax has basically hit a dead end. But now we've got this major environmental disaster. Obama appears to have been asleep at the wheel in the initial stages of it, but now he's promising to, quote, kick ass and identify the culprits who were responsible for the mistakes that led to the, quote, accident. But the problem is, the culprits are his Bilderberg friends who visit the same meeting each year and get the same instructions that he does. So there's no way in the world Obama has any interest in prosecuting or finding the culprits behind the disaster. So this is all intended to provide justification for the agenda to nationalize oil companies, which the Democrats have publicly pursued. And it will open the door for a carbon tax. And the longer it drags on, the more intense the problem seems to be, with non-stop coverage from the media, who in the initial stages of this, I mean, it was a big story, but it wasn't up there as the top story every day with endless coverage. I mean, every time I turn on CNN or Fox News in the last 2 weeks, top story has always been this BP oil spill, which is strange for a story that started, what, now more than 6 weeks ago. There's a news cycle, and even if this is a big problem, 6 weeks after it occurred, it doesn't normally stay at the top of the news cycle, but it's been pushed back up there because I think we're going to see very soon measures proposed to at least part nationalize the oil companies, or at least use this, exploit this crisis to further the so-called green economy and the move towards a carbon tax, a consumption tax, a gas tax, that will, of course, completely eviscerate whatever disposable income the middle class has left after, you know, the crippling fascist austerity measures that are now being proposed, not only in Europe, but also in America. So, the article's up there at prisonplanet.com. We run through all the evidence, the suspicion, the indications that not only was there foreknowledge, I don't think anyone can deny that there was some kind of foreknowledge. This mirrors almost entirely the aggressive selling of airline stocks before 9/11.